crossover between these two books. What's also important is that we get more insight into the nature of the cult group Aurora Dawn that was explored more in depth in the first arc of Northgard, but even after the first arc of Northgard ended, there were still a lot of questions about Aurora Dawn, like why exactly are they involved in preparing humanity for the coming of new alien masters? What do they hope to gain out of this? And there are still questions about the group. But it's just interesting to see just how deep this cult runs. I think it's safe to say, at least my impression is that they're much more than a religious cult. And I get the sense that by the time this arc is fully over, Aurora Dawn is going to be just as worried as Deschamps and the good folks at Pact. An interesting thread which runs throughout Freelance is the romantic tension between Lance and John. Lance and John are both gay, they're both homosexual, but those terms aren't used at all, which is, I find, refreshing. We see that they do care very deeply about each other, and it's their conflict over Lance's distaste of John's shoot-to-kill when necessary approach that keeps them from embarking on a full romance. But Tasha's one there who's telling them that they both care for each other very deeply, and they both need to work through that. This is just another example of how good the folks at Chapter House have been about creating a diverse cast of characters. So we have two characters here who are homosexual, but that doesn't define who they are. It's their actions that define them, and they just happen to be gay. I've talked about this many times, how I really don't like that at the two major comics publishers, they're introducing us to characters who are not Caucasian or who do not identify as heterosexual, but the way in which these characters are being introduced at these two publishers feels forced, and it feels very commercial. It doesn't feel honest. Here, I like this romantic tension between Lance and John being presented as, a story not just about two gay men, but about two people. And it doesn't matter what their orientation is. And again, that's just something that I've seen popping up across all of the Chapter House books. And that's what makes the stories that more enjoyable. Now, for those of you who are well in tune with your Canadian comics history, Freelance is no doubt a very familiar name. And that's because Freelance first appeared in the Golden Age. Now, the Chapter House incarnation of Freelance is a major revamp over the Golden Age incarnation. But still, the idea of Lance being a freelance character who doesn't belong to any group and being super powerful, that's still there. So good on Chapter House for, again, snapping up the rights to a previously established character, this time a Golden Age character, and making him a living, breathing part of this new universe. So issue number 4 of Freelance has come out. I haven't read it yet. I think issue 4 of Agents of Pact has yet to come. But at this point, I do want to move into talking about Wave 2 of the Chapterverse storyline. And, first off, the creator credits on Freelance. Sorry, let me just pop out issue number 1 here, because I do want to give the creators their due on this. So, excuse me for a sec. We have the writers are Jim Zub and Andrew Wheeler, illustrated by Vanita Varayak. My apologies if I've butchered the name. Covers by Alex Perkins. All right, so now on to wave 2 of the Chapterverse storyline, which has just started up. The initial issues of Captain Canuck and Pitiful Human Lizard have already hit newsstands. And I should say, folks, for those of you who have not read any of this storyline so far, but are interested in doing so, if your local comic store doesn't carry physical copies of the Chapter House titles, you can always go to Comixology. Chapter House has been excellent from day one in terms of making digital copies of all of its releases available. So, on to Wave 2, which is comprised of 3 books. We have The Pitiful Human Lizard, we have Captain Canuck, and we have Phantoma. And I think I'll probably have just enough time to talk about Captain Canuck here. So in issue number 12, that's the legacy numbering, but with this wave, and with this third arc of the Captain Canuck series, the renumbering has been changed to Season 3, issue number 1. So giving some sense of history here in the Chapterverse, we see that Tom Evans has indeed stepped away from the title of Captain Canuck. He's not wearing the armor, however, he still has all of his powers, and he's putting them to very noble use. So it goes much in line with the time-old saying, not all heroes wear masks and costumes. And even though Tom's faith in the organization that he used to work for has been shaken, his belief in being a hero, his faith in being able to do the right thing is as strong as ever. And we do see again that Tom Evans has partial native ancestry. We also learned that Horse, who piloted the Equilibrium jet that Captain Canuck's team flew in to get to different crises, is actually a longtime friend of Tom's and actually has full native ancestry. So really neat, just getting some background development on the supporting characters in addition to Tom Evans. But in this first issue, I can tell you that Tom does get an appeal from another costumed hero to come back to help with this coming alien invasion. And of course, this being a year-long story, you had to know that things would not end neatly at the end of Wave 1. The aliens are here. And so Tom gets an interesting package in which he and the readers learn a little bit more about his father's history and his father's historic role in this whole alien investigation and intervention. Something big happens in this first issue of Captain Canuck. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's in probably just past the halfway point of the title, and it just made me say, oh my goodness, we really need Tom to put the armor back on and go back into action as Captain Canuck. The credits for the Captain Canuck Season 3 arc are Kalman Andrzejowski, who has really grown as a writer. His ability to pace his stories, to weave in and move between different plot lines within the title was really improved. I remember at Comic-Con, it was said that having this whole year-long storyline being told across a range of titles would really help Coleman in that he didn't have to tell the entire story just within his book. This really allows him to focus purely on Captain Canuck right now, while still showing us characters from the other titles, but clearly Mr. Andrzejowski is taking full advantage of the fact that there is a line of comics now, and so he can spend greater time focusing on Captain Canuck and one part of the universe-wide storyline. The art is by Leonard Kirk and Emmanuel Chateauneuf. Just looks really beautiful. Kirk and Chateauneuf make an excellent pairing. It makes the art look different from Mr. Kirk's work over at DC, but it looks different in a good way. I get a sense that within the Captain Canuck title, this is where we're going to see a lot of the action, a lot of the fighting with these aliens. And Mr. Andrzejowski has always been very good at telling traditional, straight-up superhero action type story. So I'm really looking forward to the next 3 issues. From what I'm seeing so far, though, I feel pretty bad for the city of Toronto, and I don't get the sense that this is going to be a story where things are turned back to normal at the end with magic or the flip of a switch. This is my speculation. I think the next year-long storyline is probably going to be about the repair and rehabilitation of parts of Canada, such as Toronto. Okay, looking where I am at on my timer, I've only got about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to end things here. But in part 2 of this episode, I'm going to be talking about The Pitiful Human Lizard, as well as another new title, Phantoma, which, to all of you longtime comics historians out there, is no doubt quite familiar. And then I'll be talking about Wave 3, which is comprised of Northgard and Fallen Sons. So please come back in 7 days, folks, as I release part 2 with a continued look at the Chapterverse. Until then, let's consider this class to be in recess.